This is the week ahead. Joining me, myself, Ibrahim Sani. I want to talk more about some of the items that is going to take place over the next 7 days. Of course, the big news that happened a few days ago is the death of Queen Elizabeth II. And of course, in the UK, the country is indeed mourning over the death of Queen Elizabeth II, and major events have been postponed, including what is happening right now, the BOC's MPC meeting, or Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee meeting, which is now scheduled to be done on the September of 22nd instead of earlier. If you can pull up the graph on our right to show the updates that is currently happening over the next 7 items that is going to be talked about. Yes, the central bank has raised rates by 50 basis points to 1.75% on August 4th. This is in a bid to prevent inflation running out of hand, and the new British Prime Minister Liz Truss will deal with an economy that is forecast to go along into a very, very prolonged recession later this year, with inflation at a 40-year high and limits of growth options is currently happening. Because of this, the latest Bloomberg poll of 4 analysts agree that a hike is imminent, but they differ on the magnitude of it, because 2 out of the 4 analysts project that the 50 basis points is more likely, while the other 2 of 4 is expecting another 75 basis points. One thing is for sure, it's not just about the BOC's MPC meeting, it's also about what's going to happen in terms of the pomp and the tradition that is going to take place over in the UK. So over the next 7 days, a lot of eyes will be on how the procession of Queen Elizabeth's funeral is going to take place. Right now, what we have on hand is that Queen Elizabeth is going to be interred at Westminster Abbey on the 19th of September, another 8 days to go, or 7 days to go, but she will lie in state in Westminster Abbey for 4 days. Currently, she has arrived at the Holyrood Palace at Edinburgh after making that long journey over to that palace, Holyrood's Palace, from Balmoral Castle. We're also going to see the 4 very, very critical individuals, the Prince of Wales, Prince William, as well as Kate, and the Duke of Sussex, or Harry, and Meghan Markle. The 4 of them were seen jointly in a surprise performance together to look at some of the well-wishers over at the few palaces out there in the UK. We're going to see a lot more of them in the next coming days as well. And finally, of course, King Charles III is going to make further appearances, not so much announcements, because we've seen him how he has delivered that particular announcement beforehand a few days ago. And of course, King Charles III is going to make very, very plenty of public appearances to allow for the public to actually follow the procession of not just the interment of the late Queen Elizabeth II, but of course how King Charles III is going to start his reign. So a lot of things that are going to happen when it comes to the Queen Elizabeth II funeral that will take place over the next 7 days. Now we move on to the next item today, which is of course some of the elaborations that will take place in Malaysia. It will be a short week, as Malaysia will celebrate Malaysia's Day on the September of 16th, this Friday. So tomorrow on Monday, DOSM, or the Department of Statistics Malaysia, will announce performance of the wholesale and retail trade for July. In June, wholesale and retail trade registered a steady growth of 44% to 132.8 billion ringgit. And much of the conversation will be on how the uptake of the investments coming into the country is going to help spur the wholesale and retail growth sales. We know now that the past few months there has been a steady increase of economic activity. However, this is coming in tandem or in step with rising inflation across some of the sectors, particularly food. And DOSM has indeed published a bunch of data on specific items of food and the inflation rates of those kind of food classes. However, many are remaining skeptical in terms of the real inflation growth rate. Now, we know that 4.4% was a number that's been touted. However, the real inflation rate that we feel as consumers at the supermarket is going to be felt quite dearly. I, for one, have been buying the same items in my shopping cart, and previously I've been paying 500 ringgit for a household of 5 for 1 month. Lately, I have just came out earlier today from the supermarket paying about the same things, and I paid 900 ringgit. So that's close to 100% inflation growth rate. So it's really, really dear to me. So I'm not too sure, that 4.4% growth rate is going to see real traction, or people are going to ever believe it. Anyway, retail and growth numbers are going to come out tomorrow on Monday. Also, tomorrow on Monday, the Malaysian Palm Oil Board, or MPOB data on palm oil inventory will be released. Palm oil inventory is forecast to have breached 2 million tons for the first time in 2 years. And of course, production accelerated, and stiffer competition from Indonesia, who has announced a curb on export demand, has been announced. So we've had very recently MPOC on my sister show called Notepad with Ibrahim Sani, where I've explored quite extensively and rather in detail in terms of what MPOC has in store for us in trying to manage the expectations of the market, but how to help Malaysian smallholders, especially Malaysian exporters, in the realm of palm exports. A few months ago, I have interviewed folks from the EU to talk about some of the items concerning palm oil products coming in from Malaysia into that market, and whether or not the conversation is going to impact how Malaysian exports are going to be seen importing some stuff into the EU. Another item that we need to look at is, of course, my conversation with the EU Commissioner on the Environment, which I did just 2 weeks ago, where the EU Commissioner on Environment, which we aired again on Notepad, this time last week on Sunday, where I talked about how deforestation, for instance, has been impacting the country and the region, and how the EU is planning to negotiate with folks from this part of the world, including that of Malaysia and Indonesia, on managing deforestation, as well as on the pledge of COP15, the biodiversity conference, one of the biggest biodiversity conferences in the world, and how this is going to impact some industries such as palm oil. So yes, there's a lot of conversations in terms of how the palm oil conversation is going to take place over the next 7 days. So do look out for the MPOB data that's coming in tomorrow. The fourth item that I want to go through with you this evening is, of course, some of the developments at the courts, because over at the courts, Najib Razak's 1MDB Tanor trial continues at the High Court and will be running so from Monday until Thursday. On Thursday, the 9.5 million graft trial of Tan Sri Shafi Abdullah also takes place on top of the 1MDB Tanor trial. So Tan Sri Shafi Abdullah is also the lawyer of Datuk Sri Najib in the 1MDB Tanor trial. There's a lot of conversations into how the legality and the conversation of how people are going to pull off that particular work moving forward. So if you're into trying to be a legal eye or legal eagle in terms of the story, the trial will take place over the next 4 days for the 1MDB Tanor trial, and on Thursday itself, Tan Sri Shafi is in the dock to talk about his own trial as well, the graft trial of 9.5 million ringgit. The fifth item that I want to go through with you this evening is, of course, the Palace of Justice. It's very short news, this one. We'll see on Wednesday for Tun Saleh Abbas, the late Lord President, now called Chief Justice, that role from Lord President to now Chief Justice. The reference proceeding is held in memoriam to honour Tun Saleh Abbas, who passed away earlier this year. There's a lot of conversation to how we should commemorate and remember this very tall character, and see how we can influence and perhaps even inspire future generations to be standing as tall as Tun Saleh Abbas. Okay, so those are the key items that I need to get out for this evening. We'll go for one short break. When we come back, we'll talk about the possible merger between MBSB and MIDF. We'll be right back after these messages. Thanks for staying on with us. Now, there's this big news of a possible merger between the Malaysia Building Society Berhad, or MBSB, and the Malaysian Industrial Development Finance Berhad, or MIDF, because they're looking ahead with their planned merger. Various news reports have said that both parties will consider submitting a detailed merger proposal to Bank Negara Malaysia in the following weeks, and is set to set the stage for the country's first merger between local financial institutions since November last year. Now, on a personal level, I'm very excited about M&As and mergers and acquisitions in general, but specifically in the banking industry, because I was part of the corporate finance team that was part of various mergers. But in this case, I am even more eager, because I was actually part of the team that needed to look at the possibility of the tripartite merger between RHB, CIMB and MBSB back when it was actually quite interesting to talk about it then. Now, MBSB has always been part of the whole conversation of how banks need to merge. This time around, it's no different. There's a lot of conversation to how MBSB can grow their FIs and see whether or not the idea is going to be on moving ahead when it comes to mergers. Now, between MBSB and MIDF, merger will effectively be done via a share swap. There is no cash portion between this merger, and that the EPF, or the Employees Provident Fund, your money, if you're watching this and you're working, your money and my money will end up as the controlling shareholder with a more than 50% stake in the combined merged entity. Now, after merger, the PNB will be said to be about 20% owning the entity or the combined entity post-merger, while the free float portion will be an extremely small one. And this is because why PNB is going to end up at 20% is because MIDF is the smaller entity and MBSB is the larger one. MBSB, of course, is Bursa listed, and currently EPF holds 65% of ownership in MBSB, the bigger of the two entities, and PNB is wholly owned by MIDF is wholly owned by PNB, or Pemodalan Nasional Berhad. Analysts have argued that EPF too will likely pare down their stake in the merged entity. And to note, EPF already has a stake in RHB Bank by about 41.74%. And because of this exposure in the banking sector, perhaps EPF will target towards paring down their ownership in the merged entity of MBSB and MIDF. Now, if all goes well, Bank Negara's approval to this merger could come by the end of this year, and because of that, some timeline conversation has been brought about, and the merger itself is expected to be completed only in 2023. Again, this is not the first time MBSB is trying to merge itself with another entity, so this merger might not even happen. However, this particular merger is exciting the market because of the possibility and the likelihood of two development banks getting together, having the right ownership, having the right kind of stakeholders in order to make it work, and perhaps the landscape also is demanding for merged entities and consolidation to take place even further. Now, in April this year, Bank Negara had given the parties, i.e. MBSB and MIDF, the go-ahead to hold merger discussions, giving them 6 months until November 5th to do so. And in April 2022, MBSB and MIDF has entered into an exclusive agreement deal to negotiate solely with each other to finalize the structure, pricing, and terms and conditions of the merger. Sources did argue that the merged entity could have a presence in the Merdeka 118 skyscraper, largely because the building is owned by PNB, and MIDF, as I mentioned or referenced earlier, is wholly owned by PNB itself. Again, to look back into the conversations that have taken place over the past few years, in 2019, Al Rajhi Bank attempted to merge with MIDF via a share swap. Now, in that proposal, Al Rajhi had valued MIDF at a book value of 1.7 billion ringgit. This merger did not go through because of some disagreements between MIDF and Al Rajhi on how to apply Syarah rules in the merger. I can go on and on in terms of how we can move on with MBSB and the failed mergers then, but it's worth noting that for now, MBSB and MIDF is expected to send in their proposal to Bank Negara for a possible merger. Whether or not that will happen, I'm not too sure, right? Okay, now let's talk about some of the more important things in life, which is Apple. Let's roll the visual, some of the visuals that I've had. I just came back from Apple in Cupertino. It's so amazing. It's fantastic. I've had a conversation with my colleague Lokman Haris on Focus Minggu Depan. You can see on your screen right now MKBHD. Apparently, I have inadvertently entered into his video. With 3 million views, now a lot of people have seen how I have put EarPods 2 into my ears. But jokes aside, this is actually quite a rather run-of-the-mill presentation. There's not much new discoveries or new technologies that was presented in this. Apple presented 8 unique products. 4 of the 8 is the iPhone 14, the iPhone 14 base model, the iPhone 14 Plus, the iPhone 14 Pro, and the iPhone 14 Pro Max. They're the 3 of the 8 that was introduced. The Apple Watch SE, Apple Watch Series 8, as well as the Apple Watch Ultra, which I'm going to be talking about in a bit. And of course, the 8th product, the AirPods Pro 2. Now, referencing back to the iPhones, the Kuo Ming Chu, which is a very famous leaker on Twitter, did talk about how 85% 80% of productions right now coming out of China will be on the Pro models, the two models, yeah, the the 14 Pro as well as the 14 Pro Max. Only 10% is producing the 14 base model, and only 5% is being producing the 14 Plus model. And of course, the Pro and Pro Max will now definitely become the conversation of the talk of the town. Apple wants to focus on consumers, both new consumers to Apple as well as those who want to upgrade the existing iPhone models up to the 14 model to buy the Pro model. With the Pro model, you get the 48 megapixel lenses, you get the autofocus selfie camera lens, you also get the A16 Bionic chip, you get all the other stuff, including like the ability, so this is the dynamic island that I'm talking about right now, as you can see on your screen. And of course, some other items that is made available on the 14 but is not made available in Malaysia is the satellite SOS model, satellite SOS call. That is, I don't know whether it's going to be introduced eventually in Malaysia, like how they introduced the Apple Watch and the Apple Wallet and so on. But perhaps right now we don't see that. Okay, on the screen right now is the Series 8 that I spoke about. It's a good upgrade from the Series 7. However, those who actually own Series 7 or perhaps even Series 6 and even 5 might not necessarily upgrade to this particular model. The one that I want to focus on is, of course, the Apple Watch Ultra, which is going to be priced at $3,799. Big upgrade because this is a new class of product altogether. It is targeted towards extreme owners. This is the Ultra, this is the SE. Hopefully we'll play the visuals of the Ultra very soon. But what I want to talk about then is the ability for you to use the Apple Watch Ultra to be used as a dive machine. Okay, so this is the Ultra that I'm talking about. So this is the functions of you diving underwater. It can go up to 130 feet, or it can go up to 40 meters. The Ultra, I've tried it on I've tried it on my hand or my wrist. It's huge, but it's actually quite light. It's actually nimble. It's actually able for you to use it as a long distance runner kind of tool mechanism. It's really fun to have. And the sad part is that Apple did not announce the arrival date of the Apple Watch Ultra yet. They did announce the arrival of the iPhone 14. Pre-orders are going to be made available on October 16th on Malaysia Day, and deliveries are going to start on September 16th, and deliveries are going to start on September 23rd. Okay, one final item that we need to talk about is the AirPods Pro Generation 2. This is it. It is, I mean, you can go through the features, but generally speaking, this is those that want to upgrade for the latest AirPods model. Okay, so I've been covering this for quite a bit. It's also important for me to take a quick stock take into how we can move ahead on understanding where Apple is going with this particular model or this particular launches. It's same old. I have to argue that is the case. I'm not going to be biased towards Apple, even though I love the product. Everything you see around me, on me, is an Apple product. But generally speaking, the upgrades are not necessarily, revolutionary. It is an evolution. Yeah. So evolution, not revolution. Yeah. Okay. One more short break. When we come back, we'll discuss a little bit more on some of the items that is currently happening past week as well as next week. We'll be right back after these messages.